no longer muted. Oh, it's those lights again. All right. Everybody enjoy a little break? Sorry you didn't win anything except for that one guy that got a boss pair of headphones. If you guys like winning free shit, then you should find other vendors to sponsor stuff, and then you can enter to win free shit. Yeah, we love sponsors. You know what else we love is people that submit to do talks. So today, when I was at the office, when I was at home before I came, I went through all of the submissions and I took a look at what we've got coming. We've got a lot of good talks in the pipeline. We need your talks to be in the pipeline. So if you want to get up here on stage, get introduced by me, and then maybe try to make the speaker explode, you should submit a talk as soon as you can. Make it a good one. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Okay, a couple reminders. Sunday is Father's Day. Yeah, how about that shit? I am fucking thrilled. This is my first Father's Day on the receiving end of this nonsense. God. I hope I don't get stiff the way I did for my anniversary, but that's a whole other thing. So, yes, thank you. I'm planning on it. So, that means if you have a father, which I am guessing that almost all of you do, you should go back and buy your dad some swag. Because that's the perfect gift. Buy SecKC swag for Father's Day, except for me. I don't need any more SecKC swag. Okay, next. All right, for our second talk of the night, it is my pleasure to invite two of my favorite people from SecKC up to the stage. Yoda and Triwolf are going to talk about how you can abuse Microsoft Windows at your work environment to do things that you're not supposed to. Like maybe run things as Bill Swearingen. Yes. So, let's give these two kids a big round of applause. Test. Hello. You guys hear me?
All right, so my name is Eric Guillen, go by Giota. This is Lauren Triwolf over here, and we'll be talking about some purple teaming activity that we did, specifically around the RunAs command, which is built into Windows. So let's go ahead and jump in.
For the record, I would just like to be formally known as Bill Swearingen. That's me. So, really quick, before we jump into RunAs and abusing it and purple teaming it, we're going to talk about purple teaming and what that means. Right now, purple teaming is the new hotness. It's like cyber threat intelligence of 2017. Everybody's saying it. Usually they're giving a presentation with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and a lot of people don't know what it means or how to do it properly. So this is just kind of some of our suggestions, what it means, make sure we're all on the same page here while we're giving this talk. Before we move forward, hopefully to help y'all out, it helped us. So I'm assuming everyone knows what red and blue is in the security space, right? Offensive versus defensive. If you don't, I'm also assuming that you can read. So Eric found this lovely infograph. Please read that. Make yourself familiar with red and blue. Spoiler alert, when you mix red and blue together, it makes purple. So today you learned. Oh, now I see Bill walking up here. All right, I'm gonna pause. Do you want the mic?
Uh-oh. Hey guys. I don't know if you know this, but we have a tradition here at SecKC. And I think both of you have already been on this stage once before, but I think this is your first long talk, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we have a tradition here at SecKC. It's your first time to talk, you get shots. All right, so down the hatch.
Thanks, Bill.
Cheers.
Thanks, Bill. Oh, God. It feels like Vegas. By the way, speaking of Vegas, follow DEF CON parties on Twitter, everybody. Right? Okay, so let's get back to it. So what is purple team? It's when you mix red and blue. Congratulations, we're done. Have a great night. See ya. Yeah, so it's what happens when you mix your red and blue teams together in an operational sense. It's the cohesive enterprise operations between red and blue team. And so for the managers in the crowd, like, super awesome, because you don't go have to post a new job rec asking for a purple team member, right? Like, this should occur between your existing offensive and defensive teams. And primarily, it shouldn't feel like a second job to your red and blue teams, right? They should naturally evolve into this. They should feel like this is something that they want to do, and shouldn't be that big of a deal. Is your mic muted? Okay. And it kind of boils down to a common goal of protecting the company. We're all hired for the same reason, right? We're here, we're being paid to secure our organizations. We just kind of go about it in different ways. So for this talk, we're talking about purple teaming from an organizational level, but I really want to encourage y'all to pursue being a purple individual. And that means work on your weak sides. If you're primarily a pen tester, reach out to people in the community who do blue teaming. You know, go do hack the box if you don't do that frequently. Develop yourself. It's going to make you more marketable, and it's also going to make you a better security practitioner. So a really important note, it's not enough to just like leave tonight and go to work tomorrow and say, hey boss, I'm doing purple teaming. Promote me. Yes, right? Purple teaming takes a lot of work, and you really need to focus on making it actionable and have benefits for both sides. There needs to be outputs that are tangible for everybody. So why purple team? We talked about kind of what it is. It sounds like a lot of work. I'm really sorry. But it boils down to making both teams better. Practice kind of makes perfect, and what I like to say is I'd rather Eric attack me during the day instead of me getting woken up at 3 in the morning with a legitimate threat. So I'd rather be prepared with somebody I know who sits across from me and makes my life a lot easier than get woken up and, oh my God, it's Russia, right? It also, again, for the managers in the crowd, it helps prove your business investments are working properly. So managers, you can go to the board and say, hey guys, remember that $5 million you gave me last year? Yeah, it worked. I don't need any more money. Or you can get ahead of it and say, hey, we haven't been breached yet. I need X number of dollars, whatever systems, more people to make sure that we're protected. And ultimately, it drives budget, process changes, resources, and development. The adage of squeaky wheel gets the grease is right. So if you're telling the same story with two teams backing it, people are a lot more willing to listen to what you're saying. And also you can give two different perspectives, two different metrics, and by your powers combined, you will get what you need. Okay, so we talked about what it is, how you do it, or why you do it. Now we're gonna go into how you do it. So the number one thing you need to do is foster a relationship between your teams. Security can get really intense because we like to think we are members of the military sometimes, and we talk about TLP, and we talk about engagements and exercises and all this fun stuff, right? And so people get like really aggressive. And I know I'm guilty of it. I'm like, I'm gonna catch Eric and Johnny and Donnie, so help me, I won't sleep till I find them. And that's not the environment we want. It's healthy for me to say, like, Bill, you can't catch me. Nice try. It's not healthy for me to say, Bill, you suck. I don't know what you're doing with your life, but you're never going to be as good as the IR team, right? So managers, you need to watch for that. Start by building some kind of human relationship between your teams. Encourage them to talk. It doesn't have to be about security. They can talk about baseball or how the U.S. women's soccer team just scored 13-0 against Thailand and set a new world record, right? But you want to make sure that everybody recognizes each other as humans and they have this connection and they understand we're here to protect the company. That's what we're here for. And then you need to baseline your team's knowledge. In a lot of organizations, teams are unevenly matched. You've got pen testers who've been there for 25 years and talked at DEF CON and released exploits and blue screens of death and all this, and then you can't keep a SOC analyst for more than 6 months. And that's not good. So you need to understand where both of your teams lie. For managers, again, it's never cool if your CSO comes out of your purple teams and says, well, my blue team sucks. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take those 10 SANS trainings I have, instead of splitting them 50-50, I'm gonna split them 80-20. screw you, red team. We got them, boys. Like, that's not okay. You don't want to penalize the people who are doing well, and you don't want to inject artificial growth into your team. So small, slow, and steady, excuse me. And then next, you need to create clear and measurable goals, milestones, and checks. You need to be able to prove, like, yeah, this extra work we're doing in this Purple Team initiative is actually working. Spoiler. And then finally, we'll kind of get further into our presentation, you need to engage in actionable activities. They need to yield benefits and outputs for both of your parties. So pen test ride-alongs. If your blue teamers have never seen what a pen test looks like, stick them on. Let them see what it really looks like. If your red teamers don't know what it's like to work an incident for 48 hours straight, fire them! No, you're staying up for 48 hours with me. Nice try, Brian. Right? Also, like, a really easy way to start, day-to-day operation. Eric, what are you working on? Bill, what are you working on? Going to Denver and never coming home. But also a really, really fun way, which we're gonna get into, is specific research projects, where you pick a topic and dive super deep. So, this kind of leads us into our specific topic of research, RunAs, and abusing that. It's a commonly used Windows feature, and we both kind of wanted to learn more. I read a blog about it, and I was like, what is this wizardry? I'm never sleeping again. We're all doomed. There's no point in my job. I can't see anything. And Eric was like, I don't know what the blue team sees, but I'm just gonna make it that much harder and screw them, right? This is fun. So, without further introduction, I'm gonna let Eric kind of walk you through from the red team side what this RunAs research project looked like.
Go, Eric! Yeah!
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, absolutely. So during our Purple Team engagement here, or exercise, we had a bunch of questions that we wanted to answer while we were diving deep into something like this. So we'll first start off with a little bit on like what RunAs is, why is it bad, or maybe it's not bad, right? But how can it be used maliciously? We'll go a little bit further into who is likely to use something like this, if this is something we can even detect, can we defend against it, and then maybe a little bit about how attacker maybe even be able to circumvent some of the defensive controls that are in place to keep using a tool something like this, right? So to begin, what is RunAs, right? So by Microsoft's definition, it is a RunAs allows a user to run specific tools and programs with different permissions than the user's current logon provides. So for all you Unix and Linux people out there, it's similar to the sudo and su command, right? So you can switch users, sudo up to a more privileged user, similar to that, right? So RunAs was introduced back in Windows 2000. So very, very old. It's been around for a couple of decades now. It's been built into Vista and beyond. So we're all pretty much familiar with a tool such as RunAs, right? So a scenario that we can kind of all relate to is when you're installing software that requires administration permissions. So in order to install some software as an admin, right? Like back in the day, we'd have to log out as our current user, log in as an admin user, do whatever we needed to do, log out, and then log back in as that user, right? So it's just very tedious work. So RunAs kind of defeats that, so you can just kind of do it all at once, right? So here's an example, a little demonstration of this. So we have a user called Billy, right? So Billy is just a regular user on his Windows 10 machine, and he wants to install Wireshark, right? So Billy tries to run Wireshark from his command prompt, and he gets prompted with this UAC, this user access control prompt saying, you need to be an admin in order to do that. Put in those credentials, right? So, okay, Billy won't do that for demonstration purposes. So he gets access denied, right? So instead, what Billy can do is actually utilize RunAs to run the installation of Wireshark as an admin user. So in this case, we're using Bob to install Wireshark. Bob happens to be an admin, right? And he is Bob, right? So Billy is Bob. He knows Bob's password. So he runs this installation. He punches in Bob's password, and now instead of that previous, prompt that said you must be Bob, well, now you are Bob. So yeah, are you sure you want to install this? Of course I do. So now you're at the installation screen and you can continue about your work, right? So Billy can now run as Bob, right? So why is this bad? Well, it's not bad. This is actually exactly what RunAs has been built to do. But it can be used in very interesting ways. So specifically, there is a switch within RunAs. It is the /net only switch, right? So it's a command within RunAs that allows you to run net only. So it actually indicates that the user information specified is for remote access only. In other words, right? So when you start a program with RunAs /net only, the program will execute as your local computer as a user that you're currently logged in as. So previously it would be Bob, right? But all connections that are done remotely on the network are now originally it was as Billy, but all remote commands now on the network will be Bob. So just kind of let that digest for a moment, right? So a scenario is something like being a developer that has a VM on their workstation at work. So this developer is at work, he's on his host machine, and he has a VM in order to test something, right? So this VM that he pulled down from whatever.com, some Windows ISO, it's not joined to the domain. So his host machine is joined to the domain, but his VM is not. However, he can use RunAs in order to perform his actions that he wants on that VM as if he was on the domain, okay? So, also another scenario is something like a QA tester, right? So this QA tester wants to maybe test something that requires multiple user accounts. So instead of having multiple workstations that has user A, B, and C or whatever, he now has the ability to use RunAs as RunAs user A, RunAs user B, RunAs user C, all from the luxury of his own workstation, right? So there's an example there, RunAs /net user, or excuse me, net only. Specify the user, specify the domain, and then whatever application you want to use. So here's an example of that, right? So an example of switching between users utilizing RunAs could be something like this. So we have a user called Frank. So Frank's on this domain called whatever, Geoda Lab. So Frank now has a command prompt, and he wants to run as a user called Edward. So he can use RunAs /user, specify the domain, which is again Geoda Lab, and the user of Edward, and he wants to spawn a command prompt. Of course, he knows the credentials for Edward, so he successfully gets this new command prompt. As you can see up at the top, it might be a little bit small. This new command prompt is now running as Edward, right? And as well, if we use, who am I, we're running as Edward. So Frank is now Edward. Awesome, right? So to continue this a little bit further, kind of just diving deeper into this rabbit hole, right? So now that you're Edward, so Frank is now Edward, and he wants to run as again, this time specifying the /net only switch to go back to Frank, right? So he does that, wants to spawn a command prompt, and after punching in the credentials, he now has a third command prompt session. However, if you look up at the top, it's now running as Frank, but if he does who am I, it's actually running as Edward. So it kind of goes back to the original, right? This is network only. So Edward here, locally he's Edward, but remotely he's Frank, right? It's crazy. So whatever. I don't understand. Not a big deal, right? Why is it so harmless? It's not. Well, actually, it can be. So think of a scenario, right? We all put on our bad guy hat, right? We want to use something very simple like RunAs, and how can we make it bad, right? So think of a scenario let's say you're a bad guy, and you walk into this office building, this company's building, right? You walk on in, security guys propped up watching YouTube videos or whatever he's doing, right? And you sit down in the lobby and you plug your laptop into this network port that just so happens to be right by your feet, right? So you plug in your laptop as a bad guy on the network and you get an IP address because, of course, this network port is hot. Of course they didn't turn off any type of network port security. So now you have an IP address. You're on the network. Again, maybe harmless, I don't know. But imagine that this attacker has domain credentials, right? He has a domain user credential. He could have gotten this something easy as phishing, because phishing is easy, right? Send out an email, click a link, get some credentials. Awesome, right? Or maybe he runs something like Responder, a tool that can just harvest hashes and you can take it offline and crack them or even relay them. So Responder is awesome, by the way. So he obtains these credentials and now he can use RunAs in order to replicate himself as a domain user. So what's the problem with this? Well, because he has his own workstation, he brought in his own laptop, right? He controls his laptop. He doesn't have AV on there. He doesn't have any type of logging on there. He doesn't have any type of privileged access management software. Nothing that your IT department has worked so hard to put on all your endpoints. It's not on his workstation that he now has access to the domain with. So just to demonstrate something like this, right? We have that same scenario where a bad guy plugs his computer into the network and he's running a tool called PowerSploit, which is an attacking tool. It's ran with PowerShell and it allows you to do really bad things. So one of the commandlets is get net domain. As you can see in big red text there, this guy is not on the domain. It says current security context is not associated with an Active Directory domain or force. So this computer that he has walked into the lobby with is not on the domain. We can also kind of drill that home by running system info, piping out, find string of domain, and we get the domain of work group. However, like we were saying earlier, if this bad guy has credentials of a domain user that he captured from whatever way he wanted to, he can use RunAs and that /net only switch, utilizing or pointing the user to PowerShell. So he wants to spawn a PowerShell prompt. After putting in those PowerShell credentials, he can now run get net domain again, and instead of getting all that error message, he actually gets information of the domain. So this user, or this bad guy, now has access into your domain from a workstation that is not joined to the domain or managed by anybody. And if we run system info again, we're still in the work group because locally, we're not on the domain. This workstation is not joined, but remotely in this PowerShell session, we are. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are thinking, well, that's pretty messed up. How can we use this maliciously, right? Well, there are many ways we can use this maliciously. The world's your oyster. Think about whatever you want to do. A couple reasons, or a couple things you can do. Running Bloodhound. Now that this guy is on your network, let's run Bloodhound. Let's find the most optimal path we can in order to attack a specific person or go after a specific computer. We can run some type of curb roasting attack. Well, we have access to one user, why not get more users? Let's run curb roasting, let's get some curb roast tickets because now we are a domain user, and let's drop down those tickets to a hash that we can crack online, or offline, excuse me. Or, even worse, let's use something like DC Sync. It's an attack that's pretty nasty. It allows anyone that has domain admin access on the network to perform some type of synchronization with a domain controller, basically saying, hey, I'm a domain controller, let's synchronize data. Specifically, let's get your user information, maybe some hashes, and now I have all the things. So in this demo here, we have that same session, right? So the attacker has abused the user of Alice on the domain, right? Alice so happens to be a domain administrator, and now we take this PowerShell session, we drop it down to a command prompt, and we run Mimikatz. Well, guess what? Because we're on our own workstation that has, does not have whatever type of AV that's installed in the network or whatever logging that we have on the workstation or any type of controls that are distributed on all your endpoints, they're not on this person's workstation because you utilize RunAs. So Mimikatz runs just fine. So to top it off, let's run DC sync, right? Let's point it at the domain, let's point it at the domain controller, let's dump everything, and now we have all the hashes. Now we can just walk away, get a really strong foothold into the network, and have all the accounts that we want. So, yeah, have fun.
Damn it, Eric. All right, so basically, if you have Active Directory in your environment, we are screwed. Woo! Right? Right, like undoubtedly, if we have AD, you have some user who decided that Spring 2019 was a great password. And guess what? Eric's gonna find that. So sorry, blue teamers, we're just gonna go home. Like, I don't know. But that's not true. So we can go through what you can do to detect and defend against this RunAs abuse. But we do need to talk about who's likely to be attacked. If you use Active Directory, which I feel like most of us do, unless magically your board approved getting Macs only. I don't know if that even would work. But this is due to a higher likelihood of group overlap and wider access to elevated credentials. Again, undoubtedly somebody has forgotten that you are a DA, Bill, and they forgot to remove you, and we are all doomed, because Bill's a DA. Or your servers. Also, previously compromised users and endpoints, that's a great attack vector in. So with RunAs, this is usually a second stage attack point. This is usually a lateral movement or privilege escalation where they're trying to get further and further and further until they've got a vice script on your PCI servers or the keys to the kingdom and you're screwed. So if you have endpoints that antivirus signatures aren't being updated, or a user who has just decided like, hey, yeah, I keep getting these emails from have I been pwned? What do I do again? Right? So these people are the first targets. They're your initial foothold. Those are what your attackers are going after first. And even commodity tools like Emotet have given access to systems. Attackers don't really have to build their own access tool anymore because Windows and Microsoft have done it for them. So it makes it a lot easier. Thanks, Microsoft. All right, so let's get into the fun stuff. Yay, blue team, woo! Thanks. I heard like 4 cheers, love it. So let's talk about how we can detect Eric. So a really fun way and kind of the overarching theme of this is anomaly detection and trend analysis. It's very hard because these kinds of things blend in. Eric's pretty much become a part of my domain, and unless I really know my environment well or have something set up to detect changes in my environment, I'm not gonna see him. So one thing that I highly recommend to report on but not alert on, distinct differences, are different host names that are associated with users. So if Eric normally logs in from host 1 and then he logs in from host 2 tomorrow, I want to know about that. I probably don't want to have an alert come to my incident response team because that's going to go crazy, right? Like executives get new iPads all the time. People decide that they're just going to switch laptops in the middle of the year. It becomes very hard. But we do want to understand when those types of changes happen. And again, going back to baselining, you want to understand what that looks like in your environment. I'm going to be a big Microsoft shill here and say you need ATA. You need Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics on your domain controllers. Microsoft has said, wow, trend analysis and like user behavior analytics and these types of things are like the way of the future, man. We're gonna build this into a tool and we're gonna sell it to you. Woo! Go Microsoft, thank you for your defense. But ATA is actually super, super cool. It parses your authentication and authorization logs on your domain controllers and builds profiles of your entities and your users and tells you when something deviates from that. So maybe it won't tell me when Eric decides to be host 2, but it will tell me when host 2 decides to try to poison my main DNS servers, right? It'll tell you about anomalous activities are occurring. Again, a lot of overhead goes into this, so just be prepared to set it up, as most security tools are, but it is a super helpful thing to do. A key part of this, though, you need ATA on every domain controller where authentication occurs. If you have it half deployed, you're going to see half of the traffic, and you're pretty much going to be blind. Next part, domain controller logging. Kerberos tickets show account authentication, and it can help show hosts that are not normally, and that should say not normally associated with that account. So 4769, that Windows event, a Kerberos service ticket was requested, is a great way for detecting this. And this kind of has similar blue team detections for Kerberosting. It's a great indicator of lateral movement, and you can use it to watch for anomalies. So if a service ticket was requested from host 2 and it has never been requested before, we want to know about that. Windows event logging on your host. This includes Windows event forwarding to your security teams. This can be really hard, and it doesn't really help the fact that Eric brought his own laptop into our lobby and plugged it in, and now has decided to do whatever he wants to do. But it can help mitigate our threat on managed endpoints. So 4624, everybody's favorite logon event type. Look for logons with type 9. This is tied to the new credential type, and Microsoft says this is a caller cloned, which cloned its current ticket and specified new credentials for outbound connections. This is a new logon session that has the same local identity, but uses different credentials for other network connections. Now, a super important part on this logon type 9 and 4624. These are starting to become less and less common as we move into Windows 10, pretty much. So, a really, really great way to detect, and we've kind of proved this out when we were watching Eric's testing, is looking for logons with explicit credentials 4648. And Microsoft specifically notes this in the documentation that is likely tied to RunAs usage. So if you don't take anything from tonight, please just take the fact that you need to look at your 4648 logs. And finally, like if you really want to get, into the weeds, execution of RunAs.exe on managed hosts is a really quick and easy win. We want to see who's doing this. And one really important part on this is just remember, prevention is nice. I would love to prevent Eric from coming into work and doing these things to me, but detection is a must. So if you do not have the visibility, you don't have the logging, that is the first argument you need to make. You need to be able to see what happens, even if it is post-compromise. Just don't log?
No, you fire Eric and he won't come into the office.
Listen, I have so many more problems than just Eric. They just keep coming. I can't stop them from hiring red team people. No, Eric's really great. I just use Eric because he's next to me. So let's talk about what threats have actually used RunAs. Again, compromised managed endpoints, easy attack. They already have a foothold. That's the first thing that they're going to go after. But we also see tools attempting to elevate privileges, specifically leveraging RunAs.exe or its PowerShell counterpart. So rats have been seen using RunAs, PowerSploit and Metasploit, obviously, two big names. Cobalt Strike has been using it. Oh, Jesus.
Stop. Who saw that 4648 shit? That was fucking amazing. So for that, you two get another shot.
Thanks, Arthur.
Fuck.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. I really do need to know who's taking me home now. Okay. I guess not Bill. Specifically, though, Empire and Posh C2. These two do something that's super, super interesting. So they leverage invoke-runash.ps1, which is a part of the Fuzzy Security Suite. This is a PowerShell alternative to RunAs.exe, And if you're just looking for RunAs.exe, you are never going to find this. You need to look for its PowerShell twin. So Empire and Apache 2 both have those features built in. How can we defend? Okay, we can't. I'm sorry. The world is ending. We can't defend against this. But what we can do is we can put rocks in their shoes and pray that they make enough noise that we catch them when they're trying to do something worse. And this is important because we cannot stop everything. We cannot stop everyone. I'm sure everybody in this room has a story about not being able to stop the bad guys. But we need to make it harder for them. That doesn't mean we don't try. So we can use layered defense to stop low-hanging fruit and make it a lot harder, at least on the managed hosts, and maybe a little bit harder on the unmanaged hosts if we don't leave ports open in our lobby to actually abuse RunAs. So to stop it from being called by CMD, you need to remove permissions from the System32exe, first bullet point. Super easy. Now, as Eric noted, there are legitimate uses for this from developers or sysadmins. So don't go do this tomorrow at 8 a.m. and just like leave, right? Talk it through with your risk management team and talk it through with managers. Second, you can remove access from App Locker for managed hosts. This will stop that pop-up from coming up where it says like, who do you want to install Wireshark as, Lauren? Do you want to make it Eric? I don't know. But this is also super helpful if you're already using App Locker to manage your Windows deployment. This is a really, really quick and easy win. If you already have these profiles built in App Locker where you can say, Eric's an accountant, Bill is in marketing, they never need to do RunAs. Great, easy win. Also, you can do registry key changes on managed hosts. So you can remove specific key values from the registry, and these are in the notes, so if you want them later, it's like 8 values. Just remove them from your managed host. Authentication silos, and this is where if IT people were in this room, they'd be telling me, Lauren, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know what we need, stop talking. Authentication policy silos are a way to contain high privilege credentials and like crown jewel systems. So if I am a DA, I would put a policy saying, Lauren, as a DA, you should never be authenticating to a domain controller except from your MacBook. If we ever see anything else, that's wrong, you're banned, you're fired, something's happening, right? But if you have people who work remote, if you have 85 domain controllers for whatever reason, or if your DAs have just been allowed to run amok in your environment, this is gonna be a really hard fight to fight. But it's a really important fight to fight as well. It really helps minimize the threat vectors and bring down what people can access. At the very least, you should be logging on these things to say, I want to know when Eric tries to access DC1 from a host that matches my standard laptop naming convention. Even if you don't block him, we still want to know about that. Again, detection is a must. Of course, to stop Eric from coming into my lobby and plugging in whatever computer he comes in with no controls on it, port-based network access control is really easy and everybody should be doing it. We don't want people bringing in their computer, hooking into a random cube and being like, well, I'm torrenting now, screw you, DMCA, it's all this company's fault, right? So make sure you lock down what's open. Don't leave hot ports available for anyone to come in and watch porn or torrent or do whatever they want to do. And finally, limit privileged account authentication to specific machines. This kind of falls under the authentication silos. But if you don't want it to sound as scary, you can just be like, well, we're limiting your ability to authenticate to a specific machine.
Thank you, Lauren. So yeah, those are a lot of things that can defend, log, protect yourselves from bad guys. But there are ways that an attacker can even circumvent something like this, right? So I know Lauren mentioned a lot of things that can log, right? But as far as defend, it's a little bit harder, right? So as an attacker, maybe we just go the easier route. So one of the first things, we kind of go back to that developer that has a VM in order to perform normal work functions, right? Well, all that traffic is getting routed back to that one network interface that the developer has on their workstation, on their host machine. So what that guy can do, what that developer can do, is actually create a second network card, or plug in a USB network card, and actually have that VM route traffic through that one instead. So now, when you're running traffic from your VM, it actually goes through this other network card that actually doesn't have the controls that your host does. So one way to actually kind of prevent yourself. So number 2, unmanaged device. Lauren already spot checked on this. I mean, it's pretty hard to do that. On the network level, you can, but if you bring in a device such as Eric's laptop from home, it's a little bit harder. The third way, I know Lauren mentioned a little bit about some NAT controls, some 802.1x, ways to defend yourselves against port-based security. Well, there are ways to bypass that. Specifically, maybe there's a VoIP phone that's on the network, right, or a printer. I don't know. So these devices, they're a little bit dumber. They don't have AV on there. I don't know if you can actually put AV on a printer. Maybe you can, right? So maybe an attacker just unplugs the printer and puts his own laptop in, changes his MAC address, and says, "Hey, I'm a printer now. Let's check out this network," right? So there's ways to bypass these controls. It's very hard to defend against something like this, and that's why at the network layer you need to be logging these connections that occur from anomalies, right? So people that are doing things from places that they shouldn't be doing it from. You need to be able to see that. Bad guys.
Printer!
Fucking printers.
The printer is owned. That's the moral of the
Save
story.
paper.
So, really quick, we talked about actionable purple teaming, which ironically acronyms out to APT, so you are welcome. You're very welcome. But I really want to give a huge shout out to Eric, and not Brian, for helping me come up with these 17 different test scenarios, and I'm hoping that you guys find these useful as well. So these are 17 specific tests that we were able to come up with to test our detection, our defenses, and the abuse policies of. And this is kind of what actionable purple teaming looks like, right? You think of every possible way somebody could abuse this, and somebody could use this for bad, and you go through it, and you pray that every defense that you put in place actually works, which, as Eric has just shown, it doesn't. So, I don't know. But you do find a lot of really interesting things about this. So, lessons learned. There's a huge value add for having purple teaming go on between the red and blue team together. We're the same people. Eric and I do the same thing. We're trying to secure our organization. We just go about it in different ways. And there's nothing to be like, hey Eric, I am not angry about this. In fact, this is hysterical to me because it just makes me want to be that much better.
We love you, Eric!
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody.
And hopefully,
Not that bad.
no.
Good teddy bear.
Yeah, Eric's great. Eric's just taught me so much in the last year. And hopefully, both teams have learned from this exercise, right? We've made each other better. We've improved each other so that the low-hanging fruit is gone, and now we can focus on the really serious shit that might hit us. RunAs can kind of make you a ninja. You pretty much blend in with the environment. You disappear into the trees. So for blue teamers, kind of the takeaway here is you need to stop them before they can get to this second stage. And I know a lot of people harp on this, but it took 17 tests for us to say, oh my God, we have to stop them before they get on our endpoint. We have to stop them before they get our credentials, because look at what they can do. And we will never see it. Or we might, and it might be too late. Also, actionable purple teaming takes a lot of work and collaboration. We are very, very lucky to have a local team in Kansas City who are very collaborative and also pretty much SecKC 2.0. I'm not gonna brag too much, but we're pretty awesome.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Sorry, what was that? But we're all friends, we all want to work together, and we talk every day. We try to form these relationships and build each other up. And that gets really hard with remote teams. So you have to keep at it, even when it sucks, and even when it's hard, and even when the pen test team is kicking your ass, because inevitably they end up doing it, right? Blue team's a thankless job. But you gotta keep working at it, because we're only making each other better. And maybe one day you wanna be a red teamer, and you need to see what they can do. And finally, there's a lot of hidden things going on in your environment you have no idea about, right? And these kinds of exercises will help you expose them. We found things that I was like, I'm not even looking for RunAs, like I'm looking for RunAs abuse, and I'm finding other things, and I'm like, why? Like, why? Why is this a thing? Why do we have people hanging out with these domain admin credentials? Why do we have these registry keys still open? Like, oh, why are none of our security tools being deployed to this specific region, right? Like, it starts exposing things that you're like, I never thought about this. There's no way to trigger it. I see you pointing at me, Bill.
I laughed at the security tools in a certain region.
But it highlights things that you're like, there's no good way to check unless you go in and you try to be bad and you try to do it. So really quick, I'm gonna end on resources, but I'm also gonna pose a few questions to the audience. So a huge shout out to our colleague, Thomas Gardner. He's at InfoSec Intern.
InfoSec Intern.
Yeah, InfoSec Intern. He did a huge amount of work on this. He couldn't be here tonight because he's in Denver for some reason. I don't know why we let him do that.
It's not even that cool.
I know. But he did a huge amount of work for us. I'd encourage you to go follow him. He's a really, really smart guy. Like, put a lot of work into this. Just couldn't be here to present for us. Obviously, like, Microsoft, this is your fault, so you better have a lot of documentation, which they do. TechNet, my friends, please read about it, learn about it. Also, you can take a look at the PowerShell RunAs Brethren under PowerShell Suite, and learn more about hardening. Citrix did a really great article, and ZDNet kind of talked about remote access Trojans that utilize RunAs to elevate their permissions. But before we go, we talked about actual purple teaming. I didn't really talk about anything specific, but I'm going to pose to you my two favorite scenarios for getting started with actionable purple teaming. So can I get a quick hand raise of how many of you are blue teamers or self-described blue teamers in the audience? Okay, cool. So like 5. Dope. So good news. If any of you are looking
Red
for
teamers? Sorry.
no, don't do it. How many of you are red teamers?
Equally is not so.
I just didn't. No one wants to raise their hand. So cool fact, right? They say there's like what 5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs by 2020, or like 10 million, or I don't know. Everyone keeps exaggerating it. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Most of those are in blue team. So if you're looking for a job tonight, go look for the people who are hiring for incident response, forensics, SOC analysts, those types of things. There's a lot of unfilled positions there. But for actionable purple teaming, for the blue teamers, here's a question I pose to you. And you can answer me in person, or you can answer me on Twitter at John Viller. It's the beginning of our slides. Given your current level of access, your current knowledge of your organization, and if I give you 12 hours to be the worst person possible, what is the worst thing you could do to your company?
I heard a lot of giggles out there.
Okay, right? So that's something to think about, because somebody else in the world is thinking like that when you might not be. So that's a really good intro to actionable purple teaming. And for the red teamers, so this might be a little bit more fun, I don't know. I'm gonna give you an unlimited budget of $500,000 to deploy any, not you, Bill, you don't have any money.
You can't say unlimited.
Unlimited. A limited budget of $500,000 with no strings attached to deploy any security control. What do you deploy, and why do you deploy it? And that's it. Something to think about, something to chew on. I think we can open up to questions if we want, but that's it.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be downstairs.